Ever wonder what's really going on when we cook?
We delve into the history
And understand the science of food.
so your cooking will become something special.
Honey, it's the nectar of the gods. Absolutely nothing added and nothing taken away.
The Greeks love it on yoghurt, the French all over a hot crepe, while the Aussies slap it all over their shrimps on the barbie. I'll be using honey to marinate a pork chop and make a delicious honey and ginger steamed pudding. We'll be finding out how an Egyptian queen used honey to keep her young and beautiful and discover why it was such a big hit with the greatest sportsman of all time.
Honey is totally unique. We eat it in exactly the same form as bees do. But for me as a cook, it's not simply about the sweetness, but about its really distinctive flavour. Like a good wine, it can go from a delicate bouquet to something really dark and heady. But the most remarkable thing about honey is the sheer effort it takes to produce. If you spread just half a teaspoon of honey on your toast in the morning, you've just used up one bee's entire life's work.
Of course, without bees, there's no honey, and bees are nearly as old as the dinosaurs.
And bees have been around for millions of years, much longer than human beings have been around to eat honey. And essentially, the bee colonies have been doing the same thing for all that time, which is a pretty amazing thought.
When early man made an appearance 2 million years ago, he soon developed a taste for nature's sweetest offering.
If you remember, the diet of those people in those days was amazingly bland. They're surviving on nuts, roots, fruits, the odd bit of meat they could collect, and then this fantastic substance that they could just find, guarded by bees, honey.
And so to have this sudden chunk of sweetness coming into your life, it must have been like just the most incredible thing. It must have been almost like a drug.
It wasn't until around 5000 BC that man learned by controlling the bee colonies he could increase honey production.
Beekeeping really started with the ancient Egyptians. And we know that honey was a major part of the Egyptian economy. People were producing huge amounts of honey.
The earliest beehives were kept by the banks of the Nile. And one of history's most beautiful women, Queen Nefertiti, made the most of the honey they made. Her makeup and beauty lotions all contained honey, and her impressive wig was held in place by a good dollop of Egypt's finest. But the Egyptians also had more morbid uses for honey.
It can be used as a preservative not just for fruits, but also for bodies, so that great kings and important men would be preserved in vats of honey.
But it wasn't just for mere mortals. For the devout Egyptians, honey had some special powers.
Honey was a gift to the gods to appease them. In the city of Crocodilopolis, there was a sacred crocodile. Apparently the people used to go down to the lake in which it was kept, literally open up its mouth, put the honey in, close the mouth, and then scarper. But this was part and parcel of the way of life. This was the sacred animal. You kept the sacred animal happy by giving it honey.
While the Egyptians were the first to harvest their honey from hives, beekeeping soon spread across the world. But it was thousands of years before we fully understood how bees make honey.
It's very early in the season, but the bees are already out flying, and they will fly up to 3 miles away from their base. They can fly, I think, up to 15 kilometers an hour, so there's no point trying to outrun them. But in their whole lifetime, each bee will produce only about half a teaspoonful of honey. So you can imagine that's an awful lot of bees to produce 1 jar.
Honey isn't something bees can just find. They have to make it themselves. They start off by collecting nectar from flowers, lots of them. It's a giant shopping spree, the equivalent of us racing up and down London's Oxford Street 50 times in a day. That's nearly 60 miles, and the bees are carrying half their body weight in nectar. Back at the hive, protein enzymes are added before the nectar is dried out by the beating of thousands of wings. Then it's stored in wax cells ready to be eaten by the bees or to end up on your toast.
I think if they thought they were toiling away for us, they probably wouldn't toil. I mean, If someone came into your house and nicked all your surplus food, you wouldn't be very pleased either.